They laughed when he asked if he could fix something in exchange for a meal. Dirty clothes, tired eyes. A black man everyone had already judged before he spoke. People turned away. Some mocked him. Others pretended he didn't exist. To them, he was just another homeless man asking for food in the wrong place. What no one bothered to ask was why his hands were steady or why his gaze carried discipline instead of desperation. Because long before this moment, before the streets and the silence, his life had followed a very different path. And when that past finally surfaced, the laughter didn't just stop, it turned into something no one there was prepared to face. Before that afternoon, his life followed a quiet, invisible rhythm that most people never noticed. His name didn't matter to the crowds that passed him, but his routine did. Every morning he woke before the city fully stirred, folded the thin blanket he carried, and walked the same streets with measured steps. He avoided trouble. He avoided attention. Survival had taught him that being unseen was safer than being noticed. Once long ago, his days were filled with structure and purpose. His body had been trained to endure pressure, his mind conditioned for focus and precision. But years of loss, bad decisions, and doors that closed faster than they opened slowly pushed him out of that life. Opportunity faded, pride followed. Eventually, the streets became the only place that didn't turn him away. Still, he held on to one thing: discipline. He kept his hands clean when he could. He repaired what others discarded: broken bikes, loose wires, cracked tools. Fixing things reminded him that he still knew how to make something work again, even when his own life felt beyond repair. That day, hunger sat heavier than usual. His body ached, and the familiar emptiness made every step slower. When he reached the edge of the neighborhood, the contrast was impossible to miss: clean storefronts, polished cars, people with places to be. It was the kind of place where someone like him didn't belong. He paused, steadying himself, rehearsing the same silent question he had asked countless times before. Not for money. Not for sympathy. Just food. In exchange for work. What he didn't know was that this place, and the people inside it, were about to test more than his patience. They were about to expose a judgment that would change everything that followed. As he stepped closer to the building, the shift in atmosphere was immediate. Conversations slowed. Eyes followed him in quick, measuring glances. He could feel the tension settle before anyone said a word. This was not a place accustomed to people like him walking through its doors with confidence, even less asking for anything in return. He waited near the entrance, careful not to block the way, rehearsing his offer in his mind. Work for food. A fair exchange. Something he had done dozens of times before. But here the response wasn't polite refusal or quiet indifference. It was something sharper. Laughter surfaced, first from one corner, then another. Not loud at first, but deliberate, enough to make sure he noticed people glanced at his clothes, at the wear in his shoes, at the roughness of hands shaped by years of labor. Their expressions said what their words didn't need to. He didn't fit the image of someone capable, useful, or worth listening to. To them, he was out of place by simply standing there. He tried to remain calm. He had learned long ago that reacting only gave others what they wanted. But the attention grew heavier. A few phones lifted, not to help, but to record. Someone pointed toward the tools he carried, shaking their head as if the idea itself was ridiculous. The message was clear: his offer wasn't being considered. He was being judged. The humiliation settled deep, the kind that doesn't explode but slowly tightens around the chest. Hunger sharpened it. So did the familiar realization that this wasn't just about being homeless. It was about assumptions layered on top of one another, about how easily people decided who he was without asking a single question. He adjusted his stance, grounding himself the way he used to before moments of pressure. A habit left over from another life. His posture didn't match the image they had already built of him, and a few people noticed. The laughter softened, replaced by confusion. There was something about the way he stood, the way his eyes scanned the space, focused and alert, that didn't align with their expectations. Still, the judgment didn't stop. Someone dismissed him with a wave of the hand. Another stepped closer, not to help, but to reinforce the boundary he wasn't meant to cross. The message repeated itself in 100 small ways. Leave, disappear, go back to wherever you came from. He took a slow breath. Walking away would have been easier. It usually was. But something held him there. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was hunger. Or maybe it was the quiet certainty that he had nothing left to lose. As he turned slightly, preparing to leave, a small detail caught someone's attention, the way his hands moved over a nearby piece of equipment. Instinctive, precise, confident. Not the movements of someone guessing, but of someone who knew exactly what they were looking at. A pause rippled through the group. The energy shifted again. Because in that brief moment, the man they thought they had figured out revealed a crack in their assumptions. And behind that crack was a history none of them could imagine. What they were mocking wasn't weakness. It was something they were dangerously close to underestimating. The moment stretched longer than it should have. Eyes stayed on him now, no longer amused, no longer dismissive, but uncertain. The quiet felt heavier than the laughter had. He stood there, aware that every movement was being measured, every breath silently questioned. Whatever shield invisibility once gave him was gone. Someone moved closer, their presence deliberate, authoritative. The pressure intensified. This was the part he knew too well. When judgment turned into control, when assumptions hardened into decisions that could not be undone, his offer for food was no longer the issue. His presence itself had become the problem. For a brief second, doubt flickered through him. He could feel the weight of everything he had lost. Pressing down at once the years erased, the respect stripped away. The identity reduced to a single word that made people comfortable dismissing him. The streets had taught him resilience, but moments like this tested something deeper. Then instinct took over. The same instinct that once guided him through high-speed turns, split-second calculations, and environments where hesitation meant failure. His body remembered what his circumstances had tried to erase. The way he moved changed completely, controlled, deliberate, precise, not defensive, not aggressive. People noticed. The room shifted again, sharper this time. Confusion turned into tension. A few expressions hardened. Others faltered. This was no longer a homeless man struggling to survive. This was someone standing on familiarity, confidence forged under pressure. Someone who didn't fit the story they had already written for him. The injustice reached its peak in that moment when those who had laughed now realized they might have crossed a line they couldn't step back from. The imbalance of power wavered, fragile and exposed. Something irreversible had been set in motion. He reached into the worn pocket of his jacket slow enough for everyone to see, deliberate enough to command attention. Whatever came next would either confirm their worst assumptions or destroy them entirely. And as he lifted his hand, the truth they never expected began to surface. A truth powerful enough to silence the room and force every single person there to confront who they had just underestimated. What emerged in that moment wasn't anger or revenge, but clarity. The truth of who he had been and what he was still capable of settled over the room with quiet force. The laughter never returned. The stares softened into something else entirely. Recognition, regret, silence. The tension that once pushed him toward the door now pulled everyone inward, forcing them to confront their own assumptions. The same hands they had dismissed were the ones that once guided machines at impossible speeds, demanded discipline, and survived pressure most people would never face. His past, long ignored and underestimated, redefined the space in an instant. For him, the moment wasn't about proving superiority. It was about reclaiming dignity. Years on the margins had taught him that respect is often withheld not because of who someone is, but because of what others assume they are not. Standing there, he felt something shift, not just in the room, but within himself. The weight he carried grew lighter, replaced by a reminder that identity cannot be erased by circumstance. The incident didn't change the world overnight. It didn't erase the reality of judgment or the systems that allow it to thrive. But it did expose how easily people overlook humanity when comfort and bias go unchallenged, how quickly opportunity is denied based on appearance or status. As he walked away from that place, the streets looked the same, but he did not. The past he once hid had finally been acknowledged not as a spectacle, but as truth. And in that recognition was something powerful. The understanding that dignity doesn't need permission to exist. Stories like this happen more often than we realize. They unfold quietly in moments where assumptions meet reality. The question is not whether injustice still exists, it does. The real question is how often we contribute to it without noticing. The next time you see someone being dismissed or ignored, will you look away, or will you pause long enough to see the person they truly are?